Welcome back to Dirty Hands of the Republic. My name is Tom Nixon. This is my partner, Joseph Fenwick. We'd like to give everyone an update on the outcome of the Sergeant Harold Preston shooting. As you all know, Sergeant Preston was murdered on October 20th, 2020. Shot at the same time as him was an officer, Courtney Waller. And then Vanessa Taylor was also one of the responding officers. So we understand that she was terminated quite publicly by Art Acevedo. Yeah, when he was chief. And that was in April of 2021. So after an exhaustive IAD investigation and whatnot, she was terminated. And she then appealed that termination, and we understand that she has been reinstated with a 20-day suspension. So it is June of 2022, which means she's been out of work for over a year. I can only assume that she gets back pay minus 20 days.
Only assume.
Yeah. And then I don't know if Courtney Waller is still working with the department or not, but I understand that he received a 20-day suspension as well because Waller and Taylor had responded to a domestic disturbance at that apartment complex before the second call that Sergeant Preston responded to. Now, my only question is, and what I've been trying to clarify is whether or not when Preston was initially shot, was he deceased there?
I don't think so.
Okay, and then when Waller was shot, I mean, I think he and Preston were shot at the same time. They go down,
and the son, the man's son, he shot his son first.
Okay,
I don't think he meant to. Let me rephrase that. I don't know if he meant to or not, but he hit him in the arm.
Okay, and then Vanessa Taylor, I think, retreated or made distance, took cover. What do they call it now?
Well, that would be one way to say it. Another way is ran away. Okay, because that's what she did.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, she utilized time, distance, numbers, cover, and concealment. Was what the tactic is these days.
Okay, just from what I understand is Taylor is accused of failing to radio critical information to backup officers responding to the scene and remaining on the perimeter of the scene instead of helping a rescue team. Okay. So if she wasn't on the perimeter, where did she go?
Well, the guy walks out, starts shooting, hits the son and the two officers, and she admitted to Internal Affairs that she had a tactically superior position. Okay. She could have returned fire, and not being by tactically superior position. I'm going to assume that was behind her patrol car, behind the engine block. That's the only thing I can think of. But she didn't return fire, but ran away and went into the breezeway between the buildings. She could hear gunshots and a woman screaming, stayed away. And then other officers came up. She stayed away. Other officers went to the scene, rescued the officer who was shot. She stayed away. But right after she ran away, my understanding is that the guy came back out and finished Sergeant Preston.
Okay, and that's when he was ultimately killed.
That's what I understand.
Okay.
But either way, let's say that never happened. She ran away. She ran away. That's not time. That's not distance. That's not cover, concealment, numbers. That is cowardice. And the reason she said in her IAD letter, here it is on yellow paper. Every police officer in Houston knows what that means. That she admitted that she was afraid he might shoot me.
Okay.
That's why she was afraid he might shoot me.
So do you think that this, and the only reason I'm bringing this up is it kind of relates back to the video we did about the Uvalde shooting, where I just feel like it relates to this overall sense of neglect or unwillingness to engage in a confrontation with a violent suspect. In other words, do you think that, I don't want to use the cowardice too much because I think it's a very strong word, but there's been this pervasive mentality of non-confrontation that has kind of infected police officers statewide.
Well, the There's a book on killing and on combat by Colonel Grossman, and he talks about, he's a psychologist, an Army psychologist, and he talks about the 90% of the people on the planet have their greatest fear is interpersonal violence. That's 90% of the people on the planet are afraid of getting into some sort of confrontation where their life might end. That's their biggest fear. There's 10% of the population that are more psychopathic, like us, okay, who are willing to do violence to protect. And then there's ones who are willing to do violence to prey upon others. She did not take distance or make distance and take cover. She ran away from the scene. Her explanation was, I was afraid he might shoot me.
Is there something you
think? No joke. You're wearing a bulletproof vest and you have a gun on your hip for a reason.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. There is a reason you might get shot. Okay. Other people had been shot. We were already shot. She could have returned fire. She did not.
Okay. All right. So my question then becomes, is there something the department can do to maybe filter through recruits that you avoid, or would it be recommended that you avoid hiring people who are afraid of physical confrontation?
Well, of course. I mean, they tried it at the academy all the time. They tried to teach it. And people say you can't teach aggression. Well, probably not like the kind of aggression we're trying to teach. But we try to filter out those people when I was at the training academy, but they keep getting pushed through and graduate anyway.
Okay. So you think departments across the state of Texas are being, I don't want to say littered with, but, filled up with people who probably, when it comes down to the crap hitting the fan, so to speak, they wind up being the wrong people for the job to deal with or resolve that violent confrontation.
Yeah, without a doubt. I teach in an academy now. Okay, the vast majority were sheep. I mean, there was one class that I remember coming back. They were coming back from the range, or coming back from their class, and they were having to walk across the parking lot at the range. It was full of water, and I remember the whole class just stopped, and then they're looking. One guy went around and found another way. The rest of the class, one of the sheep braved the water, and they walked through water about that deep in their core frame shoes, and their dress uniforms, like a bunch of sheep. Just walking through the water. One guy walked around and found another way to go. They lack critical thinking. I don't know. They're not incapable of it, but they don't have to. In school, in college, at home, critical thinking is not necessary for these people.
Do you think that's because we as a society have stopped rewarding critical thinking with children? In other words, everyone gets a trophy, and if everyone gets a trophy, then no one is really having to engage in critical thinking in a manner that puts them above the people around them. In that way, you kind of incentivize people to engage in critical thinking. If everybody gets a trophy, nobody's incentivized to do better. Does that make sense?
Is that a rhetorical question?
Well, I mean, okay. is that what?
Surely that's a rhetorical question.
Do you think that's contributing to this, or because I'm trying to find a solution? In other words, I don't want to see this happen again, where an officer or a sergeant or a lieutenant is getting shot at, or is in need of assistance in a violent confrontation, a gunfight, and the officer there, who that other officer, sergeant, or lieutenant is relying on to back them up, doesn't do it because Sergeant Preston's dead, and you can't bring him back. I mean, there's nothing that can erase that stain, and so I guess what I'm trying to avoid is future stains, and I think it's tragic if it's true, and I'm still awaiting confirmation that Sergeant Preston was still alive when she retreated. He was murdered after she retreated. If that's how that went down, then, we don't need police officers like that on the department.
No.
Period in the story.
Nope, nobody does.
Right. And as somebody who has been fired by the police department for expressing an opinion, I can only suggest to Officer Taylor that she be thankful she'd never expressed an opinion about what happened, because then she would never get her job back. But because, she simply got out of the way long enough for the suspect to murder Sergeant Preston, somehow that is not something worthy of termination in the eyes of an arbiter of these facts. And I think that's what's really, I'm having a really hard time with.
I am too.
It just
Acevedo wanted to fire her. If Acevedo's right, you're pretty low on the food chain. If a decision he made is a good one.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a truck. It's just run over you.
Yes. And yet she's been reinstated.
Yes.
And if I'm not mistaken, I understand she wound up going to recruiting.
Yes. A Method B position, a coveted position, a position that you have to interview for, give her handwriting sample, and you're picked from a pool of people because it's an important position.
And the reason I bring it up, and I just wanted to tie these knots together, was the fact that she is now helping recruit the next generation of police officers. And as we all know, humans being humans, recruiters being human, they are likely to select people like themselves, right?
Yes.
And I just think it's going to be incredibly dangerous for the police department if the person who is selecting the next generation of officers has already demonstrated conduct that might question the effectiveness of the Houston Police Department and its complete inability to protect its own. And if you can't even protect your own officers in a gunfight, how are you going to protect innocent citizens in a gunfight? How are you going to protect innocent children in a school during an active shooter? You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And that's kind of where I'm bringing this around, and why I'm even bringing it up is I think that cowardice is becoming infectious in law enforcement in Texas, and it really breaks my heart because it's not supposed to be that way. Certainly, law enforcement in Texas has never had the reputation from running away from a fight, but more and more and more as these incidents occur, Texas is starting to get a reputation worldwide for running away from a fight, being afraid to fight, not, allowing innocent citizens, innocent children to die, even their own fellow officers to die, rather than violently confront a suspect who is themselves initiating a violent act against officers or other people, innocent children. Mm-hmm. And I just think that is, I think that does not bode well for the future of law enforcement in Texas.
No, they used to, the stories were that they went to the academy at Houston Police Department and said, we're going to run about 40% of you guys off in the academy. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they used to do. The academy, they don't want any failures. They some people fail, some people are fired, but it's egregious what they do to get fired. Okay. And it's usually an officer safety issue. Okay. That they fire them for. These people, there is no process anymore to eliminate the bad people or eliminate the people who just don't hack it. If they have a class that they want to fill 72 for the seats in the classroom, they put in 72 people, even though a week before they only had 50 people who were meeting all of the standards. So they lower their standards, okay, to fill a classroom instead of taking what they can get, the 50 people, and then failing or washing out, sifting or sieving those people to get the cream of the crop. They don't do that.
What do you think is causing that, though? Because it's becoming more and more difficult for law enforcement to recruit. Are they trapped in this kind of perverse, self-defeating circle of kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy where they They hire bad people. The department gets worse. It doesn't attract good people. And so instead of the department being able to recover good people, they're just kind of trapped in this, self-defeating cycle of bad recruits now going to hire future bad recruits.
Well, they want numbers. That's the biggest thing. That they want the number no matter what. They want that number 72 for the classroom.
But what good is that if the 72 people you hire can't do the job?
Well, that's what I mean. They've had like 53, 54 in one class that I remember that 2 weeks before, and they had 53 or 54 people that met the minimum requirements. So they started going back and looking at other folks, and that's exactly what you get. You have these standards. They don't uphold the standard. Then when they go to the academy, you're telling me that people hardly fail a police academy? It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be difficult. It's supposed to be to weed out people that don't pack the gears to serve in my beloved HPD. It's
Not with you.
It's what it's supposed to be for. There is no process like that. Now the officers and the lieutenants and the captains or the commanders now at the academy try. The officers wrote up people all the time for ridiculous behavior, but they were passed anyway.
Well, okay, that's unfortunate. So if anybody watching this video, I read your comments. Comment below. Tell me what you think on the video about the future of law enforcement and recruiting, not just for the Houston Police Department, but for law enforcement across the state of Texas. Anyhow, please comment below. If you don't mind, subscribe, give us a thumbs up below, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you.